Mexico, the Americas. The concrete floor home that Raul Osorio built for his family in this small town was one of his proudest achievements, the fruit of years of laboring in the United States. It was also the place where the family gathered each fall to honor his wife, Aurea, who died of cancer in 1990. The family would construct an elaborate Day of the Dead altar for Aurea, overflowing with fruit, sweet bread, and a traditional shock of orange marigolds. Her soul, according to pre-Hispanic custom, would visit during those sacred days, joining her husband and children for a meal of mole, beans and rice. The tradition was threatened this year by the magnitude 7.1 earthquake that devastated a large swath of central Mexico last month. With its epicenter less than 24 miles from Metepec, which is near the city of Puebla, the quake split the walls of the house, damaged the roof and left the staircase on the verge of collapse. Raul Osorio holds an image of his late mother that will go on up on the Day of the Dead altar in his home in Metepec, Mexico. Megan Darley will for the Times. Angelica Martinez, left, and her daughter, Aurea Osorio, 14, prepare offerings for the deceased loved ones on their altar for Day of the Dead. Megan Darley will for the Times. Left, Raul Osorio holds an image of his late mother that will go on up on the Day of the Dead altar in his home in Metepec, Mexico. Right, Angelica Martinez, left, and her daughter, Aurea Osorio, 14, prepare offerings for the deceased loved ones on their altar for Day of the Dead. Megan Darley will for the Times. With a spray of red paint near the front door, government workers declared the home uninhabitable, forcing Osorio's 2 sons, who lived in the house with the wives and children, to move in with relatives. Residents of more than 200 other collapsed or badly damaged homes in Metepec were left in the same predicament. More than 6 weeks after the earthquake, many are homeless and living in makeshift shelters on the street. Looming over Day of the Dead celebrations that kicked off here this week was a question: how does a community that has lost so much remember the dead? Even if we only had 1 glass of water and a small candle, we would make an altar, said Osorio, 74. This is when her soul visits us, said his son, Ariel Osorio, 32. We have to be here. On October 31st, the family returned home. Look at the water stains, said the other son, Jalad, 42. Yes, it's nasty, his father said. The elder had entered the U.S. illegally 7 times before his wife's death and worked long hours as a waiter and a house painter in New York to pay for the house. This was your inheritance, he said. Ricardo Soto Olivar tends to the grave of his mother and father in Metepec. It is customary to clean the graves the night a day before Day of the Dead. Megan Darley will for the Times. Marigolds, also known as the flower of death due to its use in Day of the Dead rituals, sits in a pile of rubble in Metepec, Mexico. Megan Darley will for the Times. A young man picks marigolds in a field just outside of Metepec. Megan Darley will for the Times. Top, Ricardo Soto Olivar tends to the grave of his mother and father in Metepec. It is customary to clean the graves the night a day before Day of the Dead. Left, marigolds, also known as the flower of death due to its use in Day of the Dead rituals, sits in a pile of rubble in Metepec, Mexico. Right, a young man picks marigolds in a field just outside of Metepec. Megan Darley will for the Times. Despite the government's ruling, the family had decided to build an altar under a large wooden crucifix and 2 framed photographs of Aurea in the living room, which suffered less damage than the dining room, where they usually put it. A thick layer of dust covered everything: the children's toys, the old model desktop computer, the large blue flag celebrating Puebla's soccer team. One of Osorio's daughter-in-laws started sweeping up dirt and fallen plaster while the other tacked a white curtain to the wall and then pulled a table beneath it. We're inventing it as we go, said Angelica Martinez, 35. The September 19th earthquake killed at least 370 people and injured 6,000 more. People in rural towns such as Metepec complain that they have received less help from government authorities than victims in Mexico City. After the quake, residents here went 12 days without water before taking matters into their own hands, removing hunks of stone that had fallen onto water pipes and shoveling debris out of the streets so cars could pass. The region, whose rolling hills are lined with greenhouses and fields, is one of the largest producers of flowers in Mexico, sending roses, gladiolas, and marigolds to the United States, Canada and Europe. Historically, it has also been a top sender of migrants to the U.S. It is also one of the parts of Mexico where Day of the Dead, which takes place Wednesday and Thursday, is taken most seriously. Tourists come to Puebla and the surrounding towns to photograph magnificent altars spilling out of people's homes and town squares. Construction workers work on a hotel that partially collapsed in the earthquake in San Pedro Atlaxo, Puebla. Megan Darley for The Times. The municipalities in the region have done the best to continue the tradition despite the earthquake's toll. In nearby Atlaxo, where dozens of historic buildings collapsed, city workers laid out a carpet of bright flowers in the center of town. In Metepec, residents made the way to a hillside cemetery to clean the graves of their loved ones. On a recent cool evening, as birds squawked from leafy trees, Alba Alvarez Martinez and her husband bent over the gravesites of his parents with shovels, preparing the earth for a fresh batch of traditional marigolds. The couple spent 2 decades working in Arizona to build a house back in the hometown of Metepec. The structure suffered about $6,000 worth of damage in the earthquake. Alvarez said, "We just feel depressed." Still, they never considered not observing Day of the Dead. Even when she lived in the U.S., using a fake Social Security card to work at Pizza Hut, she prepared an altar every year. "We have to honor our ancestors," she said. One day, she and her husband would be buried in plots nearby and the family members would honor them in the same way. She and her husband planned to come with plates of tacos and rice and eat at the cemetery. Others would crack cans of beer for the dead ancestors, or strum songs for them on the guitar. Back at the Osorio home, the family was getting close to finishing the altar. They carried in marigolds, whose petals they would scatter in a path from the street all the way to the altar, to help guide Oria's soul. Beneath her photo, they stacked traditional pan de muertos. Suddenly, the house smelled sweet. The next day, it would smell like mole, and the family and their matriarch would sit down to eat. Sulima Jacinto blows on burning copal, a type of traditional incense, spreading the smell around the room, holding her family's altar for Day of the Dead. Megan Darley for The Times. Kate.Linthicum@latimes.com. Twitter @CaitlynLincoln. Copyright 2017. Los Angeles Times.